This is a guitarist Denis tape, and I'm in my home studio, and I want to welcome you to Bargain Bin Amps. And this is Bargain Bin Amps number 18. And this time around, we're going to take a look at a modeling amp by Vox, right? And it's the vt100x, and it's a 100 watt 1x12 hybrid modeling amp combo. It does have a 12AX7 preamp tube and a solid state power amp section. It has tons of built-in effects. You can hook it up to a computer. It has software to modify sounds and so on and so on and so on. And now this isn't meant to be a demonstration of all the amps, you know, different sounds and bells and whistles and things. But what we will look at is how does it sound in particular in the clean channel, and how does it compare to a real tube amp, or you know, is the sound quality there, and so on and so on, and what my thoughts of it are overall. Now this is a fairly expensive amp, really, for a modeling amp, and I think it's really Vox's attempt to, you know, to compete with the Boss Katana amps. Very similar in a way. It's called Valvetronics, you know, and there's a valve in the preamp section, as I said, which is very interesting because on this particular amp you can bias it on the fly in real time for cold or hot kind of sound, you know, which makes it very interesting, which means there are a ton of variations. Now, a couple things. One, this amp is like 5 days old, really. You know, fairly new. So probably the speaker hasn't even had time to be worn in or anything. And the other thing is, you know, I only know really the basics of the amp, and I'm sure if I kept it longer, you know, I could come up with, you know, sounds that I really, really, really like, and so on. But here I'm basically, well, it has 16 models, and I can tell you right off the bat, the thing is very loud. It's a loud amp, and it gives you this big amp feel, you know. If you look at past episodes of Bargain Bin Amps, and I went through the little Fender Super Champ X2, one of my favorite amps, you know, but it's a small sound because it's a small little 10-inch speaker and it's in a small box. Doesn't mean it's boxy, it just means it's a small amp sound, really. I mean, it's big, you know, but nowhere near as when you get into these, you know, high wattage amps with 12-inch speakers. I mean, that's a really big sound, especially at high volumes. And when I say high volumes, you know, I mean, you know, if you use, you know, for example, if you use it just as a, you know, a real soft amp here, you know, this kind of, okay, it sounds like, you know, you might as well use a solid state amp, you know, but it's when you turn it up a bit. Then you realize, oh, it's a tube amp. And I'm just going to play through it for a little bit. And this is just a real basic setting. I think it's like the first voicing of 16 amp models. You know, kind of just a clean sound. And here I'm just using the built-in reverb, really. It's a digital reverb, and there are several variations of that as well. Okay, so that's really the kind of a clean sound. Basically, before I made this video, I played with it for about an hour or so, just get kind of a handle on it, you know, of what I was dealing with, really. Okay. And, alright. So that gives you an idea of it. This amp. And hold on a second. I can see the summer is coming. This is getting really hot in this room. Man. Alright, now I want to tell you about this amp. Here are my impressions of this amp. One, feature-wise, it's really great. I mean, it's got all kinds of built-in effects and different amp models. And on high gain settings, it's really, really good, like most modeling amps are. And I won't even bother demonstrating it. This is just talking clean sound wise. And the impression is this. I've been pretty much bitten by the tube amp bug as of late. And I have a hard time, playing most solid state amps, quite frankly. Just the feel is wrong and that kind of thing, and sound quality wise too. However, there are exceptions to the rule. One of my favorite amps is an Albion amp, and that's a solid state amp, and I absolutely love the sound of it. Another exception is stereo amps, like chorus amps, kind of like the JC120, the Roland, which is a stereo chorus amp with a Fender, Princeton reverb, Princeton chorus. Though I love the Princeton reverb too, but this is the Princeton chorus, which is solid state and has a built-in chorus effect, or the Fender, of course, DSP. Those are solid state amps. But for real, a good clean sound is a tube amp. Now I'm very partial to the little Fender Super Champ X2. Those kind of a smallish sound in a way, but boy, it sure is, has the Fender chimes and the tube feel of it. And this is the thing, no matter what you do, in my opinion, so far in modeling, is it doesn't replace the feel that you get with a tube amp. And at the end of the day, you can tell, playing wise. And now I have to say, of the modeling amps I've tried, the Vox comes as close as I've heard. It really does give you the impression that you're playing a tube amp. The modeling is excellent in it. I found it really good in the sense that, especially if you're recording or something or playing live, it'd be hard to tell that it's not a tube amp in a way. However, to the player, the feel is just not there for me compared to a tube amp. I've gotten spoiled in that way. And sometimes, especially on high notes, when you're playing clean, you can kind of tell it's a solid statey kind of sound, solid state power amp. However, this amp comes very, very close to a tube amp. And it has advantages over a tube amp. One is the weight of it, right? It is a lot lighter than most tube amps, especially of that size. And it's plenty loud, but also it can do so much more, really, than a tube amp can, with the built-in effects and the recording and, hooking up to a computer and so on and so on and so on. And hybrid amps are, some of my favorite amps. I'm very concerned, for some reason, especially as I get older, that the tube amp seems to be more and more important, but I'm also playing clean sounds a lot more. Now I tried it with pedals, and it was really good. I mean, it handles pedals just fine. No issues there. And the sound is pretty convincing. Pretty convincing. And that's the thing. If let's say you're playing with a band or something, and you don't want to take out, your $1,000 tube amp, this would be a great alternative to that. It's playing loud to play with a band. And that's what I was saying, is that live, I don't think that many people would really notice that it wasn't a tube amp. For example, I'd say it's probably like maybe out of a scale of 100, maybe like 80 to 85% there compared to a tube amp. In fact, maybe a little more, maybe like 90%. I think it's just such a hard thing to try to accomplish. And it's the power amp section. The tube power amp section. As I said, some of my favorite amps are hybrid amps. And a lot of those have solid state preamps, but a tube power amp section. And it makes all the difference in the world, Now, and what I like about tube amps is, they have a real big low end when you hit a low string and so on, in contrast to the, hybrid picking kind of, where you're picking low strings with a pick, and then with your fingers you're kind of plucking the upper strings and chords and things. And on a tube amp, it's just a magical sound. And on this, it approximates that so very close, very well, And it took me a little while to get used to. And once I did, I really like this amp. I think it's really a nice amp, and I see why it's, one of the more expensive modeling amps is for that reason. It's very good modeling, gets great reviews, online and so on. So I'm really glad I got a chance to play it. And, yeah, that's the thing. If, I don't know, if you were, for example, practicing with a band, or, and it wasn't like some, major solo gig or something, this amp would be great for that. And, I found it that, really one of the few things that's lacking is just, occasionally you can tell that's a solid state power amp section, in the upper strings, high notes and so on, but not barely, but really for me it's the feel of it. It just doesn't feel like a tube amp, which is much more kind of inviting and kind of squishy. It's a hard way to describe it, The notes they're kind of rounded in a way. And here you don't get the feel, you get the sound, but not the feel of it in a way. But it's also something you could get used to very quickly. And remember, I told you I've only had this amp for very little. I played it maybe an hour, yeah. That's about it, really. But I could tell right away it's the kind of amp that you would end up, really, really liking and bonding with, because it really, as an alternative to a tube amp, this would be it, for sure. you know. And keep in mind, you know, a tube amp with that kind of a volume, for one, you know, I mean, that's going to cost you probably, $1,000 or so, you know. Whereas this is a lot less than that, you know. I mean, and I think for the money, it's really worthwhile. And it really simulates a tube amp sound quite well. And, you know, for me, you know, when I, you know, hear people about, you know, playing metal or high gain and so on and so on, this amp would be perfect for that. You know, I think even over a tube amp in a way. The tube amps, you know, unless, you know, it's like a, you know, super expensive amp, you know, tube amp, is not going to give you this kind of gain and flexibility that this amp will, with all the different built-in effects and different presets and voice models and so on, you know. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. It's just an alternative to a tube amp. Let's say you don't want to tear up your tube amps, you know, or you're playing, you know, 4-hour, you know, bar gigs or something. I mean, this would hold up really great. Or the tube amp, you know, by the end of the 4 hours, you really put some miles on the tube amp, you know, because it heats up so much and so on. And that didn't happen here, you know, because of the kind of solid state. And I see that they really did model it really well. I mean, it really is, for a solid state, it's the closest I've heard that isn't a tube amp, you know. And I do think, especially like recording-wise, it'd be kind of hard to tell, you know. Yeah, and sound-wise too, you know. But it's the feel that gives it away for me every time, and I think any player with experience with tube amps would know right away, you know, feel-wise. But it's a compromise in a way. But the benefits are, it's light, it's big but portable, not super heavy, you know, not as fragile, you know, and the sounds are really good, I think. Yeah, really impressive. And a lot less expensive than a tube amp. So I guess it depends what you want, you know, and I guess what you can afford too. Now, I will say that I think I'm being very critical, and that's because this amp had the audacity to try to compare to a tube amp. Most solid-state amps don't even try, you know. So in that sense, it's really great. And, you know, for modern guitar playing, you know, especially like heavy metal kinds of things, and you know, a tube amp's not going to have the gain. I mean, you have to add, you know, pedals and that kind of thing, you know. And of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but you got to pay for that, you know. Yeah, so this amp has a lot of things going for it, and I think people will be very pleased with it. And as far as playing daily or playing, with a bar band or definitely recording, and that kind of thing. And it's kind of fun too, seeing all the different sounds you can get and that kind of thing. But for the amount that this amp costs, I was expecting a lot. Or I shouldn't say expecting a lot, demanding a lot. And I have to keep things in perspective and of what this amp is. It's a modeling amp. It's not a $1,000 tube amp. But it comes pretty darn close. So, yeah, I highly recommend it, really. Now, does it replace a tube amp? No. No, it doesn't. But it's got more sounds than a tube amp. And again, it's lighter. And it gives you the sound of a tube amp. So... And there are times, you don't want to bring out your $1,000 amp, tube amp, to go jam with a friend or something like that, just to jam around on. So this would be a great alternative to that, or even just for practices or not, you can play gigs with this for sure. Like I said, live performer, they could definitely do that, And even recording, it depends on your style, of course, But, if you're going for a critical, tube sound, obviously the tube amp's going to be the real deal, with the real sound. But this comes awfully close, a lot closer than a lot of modeling amps. And again, it's very similar to the Bass Katana, It has a voicing thing, it's got presets that you can program, and a bunch of effects. And the effects are good. They're not junky effects, I'll tell you, honestly, if they had made the power section a tube, power section, and made it stereo, and I guess add MIDI too, then it'd be a dream amp, But all those things, are gonna raise the price a ton. A stereo tube amp, that's gonna run a lot of money there, So I guess what I'm saying is, for situations where you don't want to tear up, like I said, your main tube amp or whatever, and the situation doesn't really call for that kind of critical sound quality, really. And I hate to say that because that makes it sound like, oh, well, you don't care. No, it's not that. But let's say you just don't want to tear up your tube amp and you don't want to put the wear and tear on your tubes and so on. This is a great alternative. And I can see why people really like it. Because it does give you the kind of punchiness of a tube amp power section. A lot more than just standard solid state. And the sounds are really nice. And for the effects that it has, I wish it had been stereo too. That would be pretty awesome. I suppose you could buy two of them. It's a big sound. You can play with a band very easy. And that's the one thing I should mention to make sure that I get that across. It's a big amp sound. Whereas my little Fender Super Champ X2, is a smaller amp sound. It's a great sound, but it's a smaller amp sound. You know, I mean, we're talking, this is comparable to my Blackstar HT Club 40s, deluxe reverb, that kind of thing, you know, or even the PV Classic 30, you know, and it's a big sound, you know, and it's the kind of thing that, you know, people wouldn't notice and say, oh, wait, that's not a tube amp, right? It sounds like a cheap solid-state amp or something. No, it's not like that at all. You know, I think the only thing really that I can criticize it for is the feel of it compared to a tube amp, you know. It feels kind of brittle in a way to play. It doesn't have that sponginess that a tube amp would have, you know, but you pay for that. You know, it's super expensive. Tube amps have that sound. And as far as the high gain stuff, it does that great. You know, that's not a problem at all. It's not really myself. There's tons of videos on it, you know, as far as, you know, demonstrations of the high gain and so on. And there are presets and things. And I mean, I just have the rudiment, basic knowledge of it, you know. I mean, I haven't, it's not like I went in and programmed my own sound. I basically just chose a voicing, tried to figure out, you know, how to choose the different kinds of reverbs and things. I mean, I can give you an example. There's some other sounds on there. And that's the thing, when you start getting into effects and things, the tube comparison becomes less and less critical. You know, and I suppose that's because maybe it's, I wouldn't say covered up by effects, you know, but the effects, the combination of the power amp, preamp, and effects makes up the sound, you know. I'll give you a little demonstration. I feel bad, you know, not showing you what this thing can do. Okay, so here's an example of like high gain kind of stuff. can imagine, I really can see why people buy this amp. It just excels at the high gain stuff, you know, soloing and that kind of thing. You know, I think overall I would recommend this, you know, to people playing rock and metal. You know, and it just does a great job for that. In a way, it reminds me kind of like the Line 6 Pod. You know, I had a Pod XT Live and I would play rock stuff constantly. It was very similar to that. In a way, it's got, you know, tons of high gain and different models and things, you know. I was just going through some of the presets and it gets very, very loud. Plenty loud for a band, you know. And it's it's really geared towards a different kind of player than, let's say, a jazz, you know, a jazz player, you know, playing clean stuff, you know, which would be would want a, you know, a big tube amp, clean sound. Now, I have to admit, when I was younger, man, I loved the distortion, you know, the solos and so on, you know. And I haven't played that stuff in a while. I see it's getting kind of sloppy at it, too, you know. Yeah, it depends what you're into, I guess, playing-wise, but I think that really is the strength of this amp. And in that sense, it's very much kind of like the PV Classic 30, you know, and it has an okay, clean sound. It's a real nice sound, but kind of flat, you know. But my God, the high gain channel is just unbelievable on that amp. And it's the same kind of thing here, you know. Yeah, it's the sound, as far as that kind of sound, very kind of Joe Satriani-ish sound, or Steve Vai kind of sound. You know, this kind of high gain, soloing kind of things, you know. And that's just one preset, but it was very easy to dial in that kind of sound. You know, a high gain sound with kind of a little bit of delay, a little bit of reverb. In this case, I think it's just reverb. And man, quite amazing, really. Yeah. I mean, I tell you what, if I had that amp, I probably would have ditched my Pod XT Live, because I wouldn't have needed it. You know, in fact, I think this may even sound a little better, because the modeling's better and the effects are better for sure. So there you go. That was kind of fun. Yeah, like I said, I haven't played that stuff in a while, and I realized, you know, especially I hadn't warmed up. You know, with that kind of thing, you have to warm up. You know, I mean, I can play the clean stuff pretty well without warming up, but this kind of lead stuff, you know, I can't really do that. You know, I mean, I need time to limber up, and without, I didn't want to hurt myself either. You know, so you really have to warm up before you do that thing. But I just want to give you a demonstration of that kind of sound on that amp. And there, that's where it really shines, you know. I think for the clean channel, man, for probably 90% of the players out there, you know, who aren't, you know, playing, you know, real critical, clean parts, you know. In other words, if you're going to play, you know, a Metallica song, you know, it's got that clean beginning, it'll do that very well, you know. But, you know, people are more interested in the high gain aspects of it. And for that, it's really great, you know, as far as soloing and that kind of thing. Yeah. And I think there that justifies the price of it, really. You know. Now, if all you're doing is, again, playing, you know, clean stuff, and it's, you know, real critical clean playing, which kind of jazz is like that, you know, or I suppose kind of country, you know, country, that real clean soloing type of thing, you know, or chicken picking, if you like. You know, sappy. But anyway, for those kinds of sounds, you know, or I suppose even blues, you know, I mean, this can do that. You know, that kind of sound, even the blues sound, you know. But, you know, if you're playing like, I don't know, kind of like Robert Cray stuff or something, you know, and then you might want to look at just a tube amp, you know. But this is kind of a, yeah, the best way I can describe it is, yeah, kind of like a Pod XT Live and an amp with a pretty darn good amp section, you know. And for that kind of stuff, I've found that the tube amp, you know, that the modeling is pretty good, that you don't really need that critical tube amp, you know. So Vox has done a really great job here, and you know, honestly, it would take, to really get to know this amp and know it well, I mean, that would take, for me, it would take, you know, a few weeks for sure to really get into it and come up with my own sounds and program my own sounds and so on. Yeah. Anybody who likes like kind of Joe Satriani-ish tones or Steve Vai tones would like this amp very much. Or who plays metal, or, you know, plays with a lot of distortion, basically. This amp is great for that. You know, so I guess it depends on what you're looking for, you know. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but, you know, if you're a real critical, clean player, you know, mostly clean sounds and so on, you know, probably a tube amp would be the way to go. But for all other stuff, like any kind of gain kind of thing, this amp is really great for that, you know. And those 100 watts are very loud, you know. When I compare it to the PB Classic 30, which is a real rock and roll amp, I mean, the gain on it and so on, you know. Well, this amp outdoes the PB Classic 30 on high gain tones, just because it's got more gain and more modeling and that kind of, yeah, like I said, Joe Satriani-ish sound, you know. Yeah. I suppose I could say I wish I had this amp, like, you know, 10, 20 years ago. I would have loved that amp, man. You know, it's a great amp. Alright, so that should give you an idea anyway. Those are my thoughts on it. Well done. Yeah. But you have to know, you know, what its capabilities are and what style you want to play. You know, because it can do so many different styles. That's the thing. You know, but it obviously excels in distortion type things, you know, and their kind of things. You know, but when you put it side by side on a clean sound next to a tube amp, it'll come pretty close. But again, the feel's not quite there. You know, whereas on the gain setting, it was no problem whatsoever. Pretty cool, you know. You're doing that kind of Malmsteen stuff, or, well, the list goes on and on. Okay, there's a few things I want to clarify. Now that I've played the high gain channel as well, I realize what an awesome amp it really is, this Vox vt100x hybrid amp. I mean, when I had my Pod XT Live, that's kind of the sound I was going for. And in fact, this reminds me very much of a Helix LT. I remember I tried one of those twice, and it had this real thick, big distortion sound, you know. Probably one of the best I'd heard, and I thought at the time, I remember thinking, man, somebody could really do a real nice kind of rock sound with that. Well, the Vox is the same way. It gives you the real beefy, thick distortion sound. It's really awesome in a way. Now I see why it commands the price that it does, you know. As I said, it was one of the more expensive modeling amps, and now I see why. It's really, you know, it does. It reminds me very much, it's as if you took a Helix, a Line 6 Helix, and put it in an amp. You know, I mean, that's the kind of sound I get from it. Now I realize why people like this amp. You know, it's not, definitely not trying to, you know, to get that clean tube sound, really. That's not its forte, I don't think. Yeah. I guess it all depends on what you want to play. But as far as a rock amp, I mean, it's probably one of the best I've heard, honestly. I'd say that and probably the PB Classic 30 for distortion sound. But this goes beyond that. I mean, this gives you instantly a real big, thick sound, you know, especially when you palm mute power chords and stuff like that, you know. It's just an amazing sound, you know, for that kind of thing. And remember, a Helix, we're talking $1,000 pedal board, and this is exactly what it reminds me of. You know, this real big, thick sound. You know, in fact, it almost sounds better than the Helix. I hate to say it, but from what I recall, what I remember of it, and now this is just presets. You know, I mean, I haven't tweaked it or anything, and I didn't tweak the Helix either. I guess I was just going in a different direction. But this amp is as good as that. I mean, you know, for 1/3 of the price, that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive indeed. Alright. Just wanted to add that. Alright, see you next time. Bye.